The night air in the city always felt colder after midnight, as if the world itself had taken a step back from the noise of the day. Michael Torres often noticed that silence. At 34 years old, silence had become one of the few luxuries he could still afford. He lived in a small, aging apartment on the third floor of a narrow building that leaned slightly toward the street as if it were tired of standing. The furniture inside was worn. The couch had a spring that pushed stubbornly through the fabric, and the refrigerator hummed loudly, sometimes rattling the magnets that held Emma's drawings in place. Emma was 8 years old. She had curly dark hair like her mother once did, and a habit of leaving colored pencils scattered across the kitchen table. Michael never complained about the mess. When he returned home late at night or early in the morning, those drawings reminded him that life had not completely collapsed after everything that had happened. 3 years earlier, his wife, Sophia, had gone to the hospital for what doctors called a routine surgical procedure. Everyone said routine. The word sounded safe and predictable, something that happened thousands of times without consequence. But complications came suddenly, silently, and within hours, Michael's life changed in a way no one had prepared him for. By the time the sun rose the next day, Sophia was gone, and Michael was standing in a hospital hallway holding Emma's small hand while trying to understand how the future had just been erased. Grief, Michael discovered, did not arrive as one dramatic wave. It came slowly, like a constant pressure behind the chest. But bills did not wait for grief to pass. Rent was due every month. Emma needed food, clothes, school supplies. There were doctor visits, school events, winter coats, and electricity bills that grew larger each year. Michael had always been a hard worker. Before Sophia died, he worked at a warehouse during the day while she managed a small daycare from their home. After she was gone, one job became two, and then two became three. During the day, he worked in a massive warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Trucks arrived continuously, unloading crates and pallets filled with everything from household goods to industrial parts. Michael spent his hours moving through endless aisles of metal shelves, scanning barcodes, checking inventory numbers, and logging shipments into a computer system. It was repetitive work, but it demanded attention. A single missing box could throw an entire supply chain into confusion. On weekends, he worked shifts at a neighborhood hardware store. The pay was modest, but it covered groceries and school lunches. Customers often came in asking for advice about tools or repairs. Michael wasn't a professional contractor, but years of practical work had taught him how things fit together. He liked helping people find the right solution. It reminded him that even small problems could be fixed with patience. But the third job was the hardest. Sterling Industries had recently hired him for a midnight shift at their data center. The building sat on the edge of an industrial park surrounded by quiet roads and tall fences. Most employees never thought about it. It was simply a place where servers stored enormous amounts of corporate data. Inside, the building felt like a giant refrigerator. The temperature remained at 62 degrees at all times to protect the equipment. To someone arriving from the warm night air, the chill felt like stepping into winter. Long rows of humming machines filled the rooms, their tiny lights blinking constantly like distant stars. Michael's responsibilities were simple on paper. He cleaned certain areas, performed routine security rounds, and reported anything unusual. Most nights, nothing happened. The halls echoed with his footsteps while the servers whispered softly in the background. Many employees refused to keep the job for long. The cold made their bones ache. 12 hours alone in a quiet building created a strange kind of loneliness. Within 2 months before Michael arrived, 6 different workers had quit the position. But Michael did not have the luxury of quitting. The extra paycheck meant one thing to him: a future for Emma. If he could save enough money, maybe they could move out of the cramped apartment and buy a small house with a yard. Emma had once mentioned wanting a dog. Michael smiled and told her maybe someday. Every night, his routine was the same. He dropped Emma at school early in the morning before heading to the warehouse. After work, he hurried home, helped her with homework, cooked dinner, and listened as she told stories about her classmates. Later, she went to bed while he rested for a short time before driving to Sterling Industries. Sleep was always incomplete. Coffee helped, but it could not erase exhaustion entirely. Yet something stronger than fatigue kept him alert. Emma depended on him for everything. That thought sharpened his mind whenever his body threatened to slow down. On a quiet Wednesday night, the city was wrapped in a soft drizzle. Michael arrived at the data center shortly before 8. The security guard at the entrance nodded without enthusiasm. Midnight shifts rarely inspired conversation. Michael put on his jacket, grabbed a flashlight, and began his rounds. The routine was predictable: hallway inspections, door checks, equipment monitoring, and cleaning tasks in certain areas. Hours passed slowly. At 3 o'clock in the morning, he was standing near one of the monitoring stations, sipping lukewarm coffee, when something unusual appeared on the screen. Several system notifications flashed briefly. He wasn't an IT specialist, but he had learned enough about the screens to recognize when something didn't look normal. Multiple login attempts were appearing across the system logs. Michael stared at the screen for a moment. The pattern felt strange. Some attempts appeared aggressive and obvious, like someone repeatedly trying to break through a locked door. He picked up the phone and called the overnight security analyst responsible for monitoring the network. "Hey," he said calmly, "I'm seeing some odd access attempts on the system logs." The analyst sounded half asleep. "Probably just automated probes. Happens all the time." Michael hesitated. Something in his instincts resisted that explanation. "They look different," he replied, but the analyst dismissed the concern and ended the call. Michael returned to his rounds, yet the images on the screen lingered in his mind. Years of warehouse work had trained him to notice small discrepancies. When shipments arrived, he could often sense if a pallet count was wrong before even checking the numbers. Patterns mattered. 3 hours later, just before sunrise, alarms suddenly erupted throughout the monitoring system. Multiple intrusion warnings flooded the screens. Security personnel began scrambling to understand what was happening. Michael rushed toward the control room, where several employees were now staring at digital dashboards filled with red warning signals. The attack looked chaotic. Large sections of the network were being bombarded with login attempts and data queries. One analyst shouted, "They're hitting the financial database." Another responded, "Block those IP addresses." But as Michael watched the screen, something felt wrong again. The attacks that looked dramatic were almost too obvious. They drew everyone's attention to the same places. Then Michael noticed something else. On a secondary system, quiet access attempts were occurring at a slower pace. They were subtle, almost hidden within the noise. Michael stepped closer to the analyst. "Excuse me," he said carefully. No one answered. He spoke louder. "I think they're distracting you." Several heads turned toward him. "What?" one analyst asked impatiently. Michael pointed to the screen. "Those big attacks are loud, too loud, but over here, these smaller requests, they're happening quietly." The analysts exchanged skeptical looks. "They're creating a diversion," Michael continued. "The obvious attacks are pulling your attention away from the real target." One analyst leaned closer to the screen and froze. "Wait," he said slowly. The quiet access attempts were aimed at a backup authentication system connected indirectly to the company's financial database. If attackers gained access there, they could bypass several primary security layers. Within minutes, the cybersecurity team redirected their focus. They blocked the suspicious activity and closed the vulnerability before any sensitive data could be extracted. The attack stopped. Silence filled the room again, except for the steady hum of servers. One analyst turned toward Michael with a surprised expression. "How did you notice that?" Michael shrugged slightly. "I used to track inventory shipments all day. When numbers don't add up, you start noticing patterns." Word of the incident traveled quickly through Sterling Industries. Reports reached the executive level within hours. Alexander Sterling, the company's founder, read the incident summary the next morning. A billionaire known for his sharp instincts, he'd built his company from a small startup into a powerful technology firm. Yet one detail in the report caught his attention more than the technical analysis. A night shift worker with no cybersecurity training had identified the real threat before experienced analysts. Sterling became curious. A few days later, he quietly visited the data center. He spoke with employees, reviewed security footage, and asked about the man named. Then he did something unusual. Instead of calling Michael into a corporate office, he drove to the apartment address listed in the employment records. When Michael opened the door that afternoon, he was surprised to see an unfamiliar man standing in the hallway wearing an expensive suit. "Mr. Torres?" the man asked politely. "Yes." "My name is Alexander Sterling." Michael blinked in confusion. The name was famous in business news, yet the man standing in front of him looked relaxed and approachable. Sterling glanced briefly inside the apartment. The small living room contained the worn couch, the kitchen table covered with Emma's drawings, and a refrigerator decorated with colorful magnets. Emma peeked from behind the hallway wall. Sterling smiled gently at her before returning his attention to Michael. "You saved my company a great deal of trouble the other night," Sterling said. Michael shook his head modestly. "I just noticed something." "That's exactly the point," Sterling replied. They sat at the small kitchen table while Emma colored quietly nearby. Sterling asked about Michael's life. Michael answered honestly, the 3 jobs, the long nights, the hope of someday buying a home. Sterling listened carefully. After a long pause, he spoke again. "I didn't build this company by ignoring talent when I see it," he said. Michael waited silently. "I'd like to offer you a new position." The offer sounded unreal. Director of Physical Security Operations, a salary far beyond anything Michael had ever earned, a signing bonus large enough to change his financial situation immediately, full benefits for his family, educational funding to complete a university degree, and professional security certifications. The working hours would shift to daytime, allowing him to spend evenings with Emma. Michael struggled to find words. "Why me?" he finally asked. Sterling leaned back slightly. "Because character matters more than credentials," he said. "You stayed alert when others didn't. You saw a pattern everyone else missed." 3 years later, life looked very different for Michael and Emma. They lived in a comfortable home with a small yard and a friendly dog that Emma had named Luna. Michael led a security team responsible for protecting Sterling Industries facilities around the world. He never forgot where he started, and neither did Alexander Sterling, who occasionally attended Emma's birthday parties, not as a CEO, but as a friend. The lesson was simple but powerful. Sometimes the strongest defenders of an organization are the people no one expects, the ones working quietly in the cold hours of the night, driven not by ambition alone, but by the hope of building a better life for someone they love.